history, but before we get to the history, I want to get this out there, is that Moms of Liberty, who are they? Moms for Liberty is an advocate group founded in 2021 by former school board member Tina and Tiffany in Florida. The group organized parents to influence school policy, including challenging books and curricula. Their view as inappropriate, their growth and focus on liberty-minded education have made them a leading force banning recent books and challenging. And one of the sisters that I did leave off was Bridget Ziegler. She was three individuals, three women that started this Moms of Liberty. But Sister Ziegler, she was let go. She resigned from the board because of some immorality that was going on in her life. So she left. So what we want to do is start off tonight where we want to look at some history. Remembering this here, that there's nothing new on the face of the earth. There's nothing new under the sun. That this has been going on for a while. And we can see this going on when we go back to 1873 when we look at the Comstock Act. And this is named after an individual by the name of Anthony Comstock. And he was an individual who was protesting about different things coming through the mail, such as sex toys, such as, I want to use some other things. I've seen things that was being done and talking about contraceptives as well. So all these things. So really this thing has a foundation just first of all through the mail. Okay. Now someone else picks up on this and now they take it to the school board itself. And now this is where we have the Moms of Liberty who comes in effect. So I think what I want to do is start the question off and we go around the room answering the particular question here is, what comes to your mind when you hear Moms of Liberty? The first thing out. That's what I'm asking.
I think it's ironic that they call themselves Moms of Liberty because liberty means freedom. So if you're banning something and trying to restrict my opportunities, then you aren't honoring what liberty is.
What do you say, sister?
I see them as a group of selfish people who only see things through their eyes. Perhaps a group of Karens, if you will, in that some of the books they have recommended to be pulled, I don't think they've read because once they've been reviewed by larger groups, the findings aren't there. And I'll give you one example, Jerry Craft, who has been a graphic artist for a very long time. He started writing children's books and he's written some middle school books that kids love. One is New Kid and another is Class Act. And I've read them both and he did a really good job of explaining what it's like for a child to go into a new school setting, especially into a setting where most of the children don't look anything like him. And just because he talks about how he feels, that's not a reason that your child shouldn't read the book, because your child might be in a situation at some point where they're new and they're having to experience things for the very first time and adapt to what's going on around them. So I'm glad that the book made it back to the shelf, but again, it's just an example of people having perceptions of what a book is about, not taking the time to read it. But you have a right to decide what comes into your house and what your children can read, but you don't have the right to decide what my child can read. And so you shouldn't be able to go to the school district and say, take these books off the shelf, because then that poses a hardship for my child. Now I have to buy that book for my child, and your child's getting free books from the school library. Your child's able to read the books that you feel are what you want them to read, but it's not fair again to my child because you're attacking books that are diverse because perhaps there's something that makes your child uncomfortable. But some of the books that you leave make me very uncomfortable, but there's no consideration for that. So again, the key word for me is selfish.
What do you say, Sister Joy?
That was powerful. I agree. I mean, I just, upon initially hearing it, again, I agree with Mama Leverette. I definitely thought that liberty would be more like freedom, and it is giving the opposite.
Amen. So,
And
go ahead, sis.
I'm sorry. I also think, when I think of Moms for Liberty, I think of a level of ignorance. Because when you're afraid of knowledge, that suggests to me that you're insecure, that you're afraid, and that fear ultimately makes you ignorant.
Amen, sister. I think when we look at that word, ignorant, we look at the fact of not knowing. And you made a great point there. The fact of not knowing how this truly affects someone else when you're being selfish and only thinking of yourself. And we're really going to get within inside of this as well. But we wanted to break the ice with who are the Moms of Liberty? What comes to your mind when you think of Moms of Liberty? And then understand now that this act, when we go back to the Comstock Act, and we go back to Anthony, we go back to President Ulysses S. Grant, March the 3rd, 1873. He makes this as a law. And now remember what we're dealing with. We're dealing with at this particular time things coming through the mail. Has nothing to do truly with the, I would say, public school system as itself. But remember now, there is nothing new on the face of this earth. There's nothing new under the sun. And always remember, someone is on the shoulder of someone else getting this information where they can turn it in to work for themselves. So I think we're going to lead up to the next thing is this here. When we talk about the process, a school book ban occurs when access a book and restricted for removed based on its content, often after challenges from parents and community members and lawmakers. This is included that they remove from libraries to classrooms, restricting grade levels of who can read a particular book, parental permission. All these things come into play when we talk about this process. So now the question that I want to ask to each of the young ladies is this here. What books would you not want your child to read? If you could just think of one. And just to put some training wheels on it and you take it off as we go. What book would you not want your child to read? I'm going to say this to you. This is just my opinion. I say that there is no book because I think that all books are very important. But what must happen is that you must set the foundation at your home. And then you have to have an open relationship with your child that they will come back and express to you, what did you do today at school? Nothing. Well, you know they did something. So now you must find a way to engage with them to bring the best out of them. Here it is again, when we're talking about Yahweh. Remember when Cain and Abel, and he asked Abel, he said, you look real rough today, brother. Your countenance is down. And God is trying to engage a conversation. My point is that I don't care if it's LGBT, I don't care what it is that they're reading at the school. I want my child to know about it, so then when we come home, we can talk about it to get a true understanding, because we don't waver in what we will believe at my house. Because the book says, Joshua says that for this day I shall serve Yahweh. So that's what I'm asking, sister.
Knowledge is power is much more than a cliche. I mean, we hear it all the time, but if you think back to the days of slavery, the easiest, surest way to keep people under control was to keep them ignorant. It was illegal to teach slaves to read and write, and those who learned to were severely punished. So if we don't allow our children and ourselves to be exposed to as much knowledge and understanding via reading, listening, or whatever medium, but particularly reading, we are deliberately limiting and imprisoning ourselves.
I honestly can't think of any book right off that I would say absolutely no to, because I heard, and I'm paraphrasing a quote that I heard the other day, if you care about justice and fairness, you are not threatened by any book. And so again, I would like the opportunity to sit down at home and talk about what it is you're reading. And I would have a real problem if all of the books that are read during, for example, a school year, all of the African American figures or characters in the book are in subservient roles. For example, I need for my child to see books where African Americans are in positions other than, for example, Calpurnia in To Kill a Mockingbird. I need to see children or adults in positions as professionals, so that my child gets to see all of the opportunities in places that he or she can go.
I think for me, I don't mind them being exposed to books. I think it's a matter of when. Like, certain things I might not want them exposed to until they're older, so they can have more of an understanding, versus if you're exposing them to certain things too young, then like you're setting the wrong foundation for them. Like for my own child personally, so it just depends on their age, but also like how the content is being presented to them. Like, I also care about the intent behind it. Like if you are reading certain types of books to the kids consistently, like I'm gonna question your agenda behind it if it's not for academic purposes. And then like, I mean, as a whole, I just want my child to be well-rounded. So again, like I'm open to it, but I also just want to make sure that they're in a space where we can have conversations about it, so that they're getting the right context for it.
Hey man, I've been boiling. I've been sitting here. Hi, I'm
I
ready.
can tell Brother Eddie was ready.
So you mentioned age appropriate. What are you talking about?
Oh gosh. Well, not this specifically, but it's just an easy kind of example. But I think that sometimes there's books where it's like, oh, you can be whatever you want to be, and then there's like the little boy with like the pink tutu one or something, and like that's cool or whatever, but like just not necessarily that, just stuff that could be like a little bit more intense than that. I just don't want my child to exposed to that at too young of an age, because then conversations have to be had so that they can understand it. And if they're too young, they're not going to get it. Or if you're constantly exposing them to that, then you're building a foundation that's kind of like, I don't know what the word is, but like priming, is that the word? I don't know. Priming them in a way that like I might not want for my child.
Do the other two educators have anything to say about that? I wonder, like, if you think that there are age appropriate books, or do you consider the intention behind what is being read?
I will say that yes, age appropriateness is a big factor in determining what a child should read and when. For the most part, when children are 5 and under, you want everything to be as happy as possible, and you don't want to introduce them to bigger topics, or you don't want to start introducing, sadness and grief and homelessness and just death, things that they shouldn't have to deal with until they're older. But because of COVID and the number of people who died and the number of children who lost parents and guardians, you started seeing more themes, more somewhat, I guess, hardcore themes go into children's books to help them understand, how do I now navigate that one of my parents or my grandmother who was raising me is no longer here. We lost teachers, we lost coaches, we lost classmates. And so now we're having to introduce children to things a lot earlier than we used to. But again, I say, unless the child, has experienced that, don't introduce them into a grown-up's world too soon, because if they're not ready for it, it can be destructive. It can really do damage and harm them. So try to keep a child's life as pure as possible. Let them learn adult hardships when they get of age. But like I said, more and more our children are seeing more, they're having to deal with more, and picture books can help them segue into some of those more difficult concepts.
What
I
about?
absolutely,
No, go ahead.
I absolutely agree that it's important to know your audience. Children are going to be exposed to enough negativity just by virtue of being alive. So if we can choose books in particular that are going to make their lives less stressful and enrich their lives, I certainly think we should do that. But if they should happen upon a book that you think is not age appropriate, but if they have questions or concerns about it, it behooves us as parents and grandparents and great-grandparents in my case to try to explain it in such a way so that no damage is done and so that their lives are enriched.
What about sex? I'm asking because, listen, I have 4 children under 10. When is a good time to bring up sex, and how do you bring it up? Any takers?
They're going to bring it up.
That's true. And then what do I say?
Good luck.
Help.
I don't know, but they're going to bring it up. I can distinctly remember when one of my children, asked what sex was. I was totally unprepared for that question. But thank you, God. My immediate response was, it's whether you're a boy or a girl. And that served the purpose for that time.
Yeah.
And it gave me time to prepare for when it came up again.
Man, that's good.
Amen, brother. What a one. Welcome back to the Monarch Hour. Your host Mustafa, the most powerful hour on radio, and the most powerful co-host, brother Eddie, in the nation. What a wonderful time we're having here tonight, sharing, talking about banning books and how important books are. There's a couple of things that came up during this time that I wanted to truly answer or put my 2 cents in. You know how Brother Mustafa is. I want to go back to that one when we talk about subservient roles that one may play in a particular book. So what I would like to do is I would look at that history book. And so if my child is coming home and it's seeing that how things could be played out and looks pretty bleak for the African at that particular time, I want to go in depth. Say, for instance, if we was talking about Christopher Cabal, and we talk about Christopher Columbus. So if we're talking about him, and it looks as though that the African is subservient at this particular time, well, I would be teaching at home. Here it is again, how important it is, what are you doing at the house? Because the public school is doing just what it's supposed to do, miseducating your child, and you continue to send him down and send her down there. So here it is. I would say, well, when you're talking to the individual, the teacher, I would respectfully ask, well, who is Christopher Cabal? What did he do? Where did he come from? So then that would open up the window, that would open up the door to say that he is nothing but a traitor, that he was working with the Spaniards and Portugal at the same time, and that he was never lost. He knew exactly where he was because he had the African who was guiding him where he needed to be. So these are the things that I would truly want my child to know and to understand when they walk into that classroom. The next thing is when we talk about that pink tutu. I'm so glad that you said that. And the other sister also talked about there is a time and a place, and if you see those things, that's when you mention it. So for me, listen to me closely, audience and ladies. I do understand that age appropriate is very important. But in the first grade, in kindergarten, come home and tell me Johnny and James brought Johnny to school this morning. So we need to talk about that already. This is what we do in this house. This is your mother, this is your father. There is no two male in this house that are running anything. Now, slow down, Mustafa. Where do we find this? We find it in the Bible. See, if the Bible is your rule and guide for your faith and practice throughout life, it shouldn't just be a book that's sitting on the shelf. Every question, whether it's dealing with sex, whether it's dealing with how someone in a relationship, is found in the book. And so, in the womb, so it's never too young, in the womb, we should be reading that to the child then to get an understanding. Because I tell you this here, you have 4. When they pop out, they know exactly what's going on. They know your voice. They know Joy's voice. So they know exactly what's going on. So those are the things that sometimes in my mind that I would engage in or try to engage in much as possible. Here it is again. Here's another question. How do you decide on what's appropriate and when the time is appropriate? Even though we have already answered that, but I don't think repetition is the mother of all understanding. Let's put an age. We're going to start around this side this time, Sister Joy. We always start here. Just give me an age, what you think as an age, and then an example. How about we just use the pink tutu, what you said. So what age would you think that would be?
Oh God.
And you have a right now.
Don't look at me.
I mean, I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, I just threw that out as an example. I didn't know it would come back like this. I honestly, if my kid was 5, it would be okay. I think that we can have those conversations. I feel like, I mean, kids are gonna be kids. They're gonna explore. Like, we bought one of our kids, like a baby doll. He was like, I don't know, 3 or 4, and he wanted a doll. There was nothing, behind it. He's like a kid. He just wants to play and whatever. So I think maybe 5. I feel like 5 is okay. Like, we can have those conversations. They might not fully understand it. Like, maybe it's just pretend play, make believe. I think it would depend on the context of the book and like how in depth it got, whether or not it could be a thing.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead,
then just
Johnny.
knowing the child as well too, like
That's
knowing my
also-
child
that's knowing your child.
and like what they can handle, where they're at.
I was gonna say, because I just wanted to chime in on this. I think the number one thing is what you just mentioned, is knowing your child and understanding what it is that they can handle and what they cannot handle, and what are some of the things that they are interested in. There's a lot of different things that go with that. That's why it's kind of difficult in my mind for the school to be teaching your child certain things at a very young age. I'm thinking when we're like 12, 13, 14, this is when we kind of already have a foundation as far as what mom and dad approve of, these types of things. But when your teacher is telling you mommy and daddy are wrong, and they're 5 and 6 years old, it could confuse them. Also, dang, what was the question?
All
'Cause
right.
I had an answer for it specifically.
The question was, what is the appropriate age to have whatever conversation, and we just picked the tutu, and the sister came back and said she thought, okay, 5 would be okay, but we don't have to go much in detail, and which I agree. We don't have to go so much in detail, but we would like to, brush the surface.
I also think, to answer the question, I also think that there are some topics that may seem taboo that are appropriate to speak to almost at any age. For example, Joy and I have made a concerted effort to not lie to our children. So there's certain things that are very the social norm that our children did not grow up in. For instance, our children didn't grow up believing in Santa Claus. Things like that may seem taboo to others, that we never felt like the child needed in order to have a childhood. Does that make sense?
And that made great sense, because now you're really taking the cover off of what I really was getting at, that sometimes the age appropriate may not be what someone else may think it's about in your household.
Yes.
So you have started sometime young, you have maybe waited on certain things, so I understand. Sister,
Well, I guess I have a question because I understand that wholeheartedly, but again, children go to school and they see, and the values and the issues start to intersperse themselves, for example, because, you know, another parent might say at 4, that's when I have the sex talk. Because I want to beat anybody else from school coming and having it. So how do you handle that as parents? And then how do you instruct your child when they go to school and the other children are talking about the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and so forth?
Yeah, so I guess we could talk about the whole Santa Claus thing. Like we've told our kids like, hey, yeah, I mean, our oldest likes to pretend that he does exist and that he brings the gifts, and we let him. We're like, that's fine because you know. But we've told our kids just pretty much like, hey, other kids still believe in Santa Claus. You know, they think he's real. So like, don't crush their dreams. That's okay. Let them have that. You know, eventually they, you know, might stop believing. But like we've also told them about the history. Like the story comes from this real person who was this and blah blah blah. So like they kind of get like, we try and give them the full scope. We try and give them like just make them well-rounded so they get all the perspectives of it. And then it's like from there you could choose what you believe, you could choose what you'd like to do like with that. But
they get to play pretend. They
Which
get
they
to
do.
imagine. It is just that it is, I don't know how to else to explain it, but just to say, I think that many times we grow up, and this may sound really harsh, but we grow up in lies. And a lot of times, you know, some kids are crushed by the fact that there's no Santa. It is like a thing in their mind that you lied to me about this guy. And as unserious as that may seem, we were just speaking about Christopher Cabal, and he has a holiday in America that says he discovered America, which is a lie. And so we can acknowledge that there is a federal holiday that I am going to be off on because I work a federal job. But we also can look inside of a book that will teach us what is the reality of it. And this is why books are so important, because our history is taught in America from the victor, from the conqueror, from the bludgeon, from the person who was doing the bludgeoning. Understand? So because of that, you have a skewed history. This is America. I know we're talking about books and the rights and all of these things, but I think that sometimes we need to truly understand what it is that we are dealing with. It is our job to teach our children what is true. It is our job. It is our job to look at our neighbor and expect the best from them. For instance, your publishing company. I can look at that objectively and know that you have my best interest at hand because you believe in something that is true, not something that is structured by somebody who never liked you from the beginning. And so that's the reason why I believe that we even decided to raise our children like that, because we want you to know what is the norm. We want you to know what is going to be celebrated out here in the world, but we also want you to know what is true. And we want you to know the perspective that is not being spoken of. So.
amen, brother. I'm right on the page with you. Now, as we move in and we talk about notable titles that have been frequently banned, and one of those books is To Kill a Mockingbird. And I was really drawing this question right to Dr. Leverette. How do you feel about this particular book here being banned?
I understand that the concerns, and I'll just say that Harper Lee, the author, has a long history of being challenged and banned in schools and communities, primarily due to concerns about its language, racial depictions, and themes. These challenges often focus on the use of racial slurs, the portrayal of Black characters, and the book's perceived white savior narrative. However, at the end of the day, for me, I was able to understand that she was writing during a time period, and those were the views of that time period, and that was how things were. And Atticus Finch, the attorney and one of the main characters in the book, he truly had a heart, because few people would have defended the Black man who actually went to trial for allegedly raping the white female that he didn't. And so I have respect for the book, again, because of knowing the time period that it was written in. And I just want to say that when people say that books should be banned because their children feel uncomfortable when they're being read, and a lot of that discomfort is when people say we're accusing or making their child feel guilty for something that their ancestors did. Well, now they've even changed it to nobody did it because slavery didn't exist. You know, these people were working and they were, getting residence for their time and their efforts and all of that. We're trying to just completely make it go away. I did feel uncomfortable when there were read-alouds from To Kill a Mockingbird. The same thing with The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. The N-word was spewed many different times in lots of the literature that we read. But at the end of the day, I saw the greater good of the book. For example, the themes of love and acceptance in To Kill a Mockingbird, the theme of love and acceptance when it came to the boys, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. They had a great friendship with this Black male in the book, which was, not necessarily something readily accepted during that time period. So I can speak for, books like To Kill a Mockingbird that help us to understand that everybody in a culture never feels the exact same way, that there are relationships that are forged between people of different ethnic groups. And I think it teaches our kids something, and it teaches children of other races as well. And so while we're here for just a minute, when Mommy talked about books and how we weren't allowed to read, our ancestors weren't. That lets you know the power of books. And that's why now books are still our books have always been censored. And we can talk for a minute about the books of the Harlem Renaissance and all of the great art that came from that period, and how anytime we have written about our experiences, how we feel, how this country has made us feel, how this country has treated us, that is when censorship steps in, because my telling the truth and sharing how I feel, it makes you feel uncomfortable. That's something that you need to own and to deal with. I can't take care of myself emotionally and physically and then take care of you too. You have to own up to the reason that you feel that way, and you should have these genuine conversations with your children so that they understand, no, baby, that wasn't necessarily you, that was our ancestors, that's what they did. Just own up to it. It is what it is. But again, trying to take away books, trying to censor books, it does not erase history. It never will. What happened, happened. It's there. And you're trying to erase it, it's only making things worse. Because even Steven Spielberg himself said, we can fight back when books are banned. Those are the books that you need to run to the bookstore and get. Those are the books that you need to be reading. The more people ban books, the more we need to be reading. And I have tons of quotes about that. I listened to an author the other day who talked about, it's fine. You can ban my books all you want, but the more you ban, the more I'm going to write. And so honestly, that's how I feel. The more they ban, the more I'm going to publish, the more I'm going to help contribute to the story and the narrative being told, not through a lie, but through the truth of our eyes, because we have every single right to tell our story from our voice.
Couple of fun facts. Harper Lee is from Monroeville, Alabama, and I happen to have a brother and sister who live in Monroeville, Alabama. And the Harper Lee To Kill a Mockingbird Festival is one of the largest community events in that area. And we're talking about rural, small town Alabama.
Yeah.
They celebrate Harper Lee big time. You would never imagine it to be so. We happen to have been there accidentally one year during the Harper Lee Festival, and it was absolutely amazing. But again, just to show you the power of books, in this case, particularly To Kill a Mockingbird, our baby daughter, Heidi, was never a reader. That just was not her thing, but she didn't have a choice. So I tried to lure her into appreciating To Kill a Mockingbird by telling her about the Harper Lee Festival, and that's where Uncle Calvin lives, that's where Aunt Mary lives, all of that. Well, when she had to do a project based on To Kill a Mockingbird, because Daddy was the project person, that allowed them an opportunity to really get into that book. And the bond that they formed over that book just enhanced their relationship as father-daughter. The project involved him going out and finding a limb from a tree that had a hole in it so that they could hide some items in the tree, just as a character from To Kill a Mockingbird had done. So not only does the book itself have power, its messages, but reading allows people to bond in such a way that they might not otherwise ever have an opportunity to bond. And I've seen that happen repeatedly.
Was there one particular book that was on that list, or one book that you may think of, Sister Joy, that you thought should have stayed on there, or what brought to your attention, such as, say, maybe The Color Purple, or such as Malcolm X, or The Hate U Give? Any book, nothing. Okay, nice. I'll tell you what, I want to go with that Malcolm X. And when I look at Malcolm X, I think how important it is that whenever we're reading something and trying to get an understanding of something, I think we should go from the beginning until the end, never trying to judge anyone in the middle or at the beginning or at the end. Let's truly see how this thing play out. That's why I love Yahweh, because he always let things play out. Even when we look at David, there's a certain things that David did in his life, but God didn't stop and begin to judge David right on that particular thing. He always let things play out. That's what I love about the Heavenly Father. He truly let things play out. Welcome back to the Mark Hour, your host Mustafa, the most powerful hour on radio, where we're having a wonderful time here tonight, where we're sharing and understanding how important books are to our lives and to our families, and how important it is that we should have a plethora of books on that bookshelf. It means a lot. I think the next thing that I want to look at is current and local issues that we may see inside of the school system itself. So I'd like to ask this question as we go around. This is it right here. As educators, how do you deal with the issue of banning books? Say if it was one of these books and you was in the classroom, I know we have 2 retired and 1 that's working. How would you manage around the book if you knew that book really brought some out? I guess I would go back to Kill a Mockingbird, how you really explained that to us. But how would you do that in the classroom? Would you just say, well, we're marking this off the list, I won't even mention this? How would you play this out?
I'm not sure that what I would do, or would have done when I was still in the classroom would be acceptable now, but I did have one situation where a parent objected to one of Ernest Gaines' books, specifically A Gathering of Old Men, which has been under scrutiny and I think is banned some places, along with his other most powerful book, A Lesson Before Dying. The parent challenged it because of its language, because of some sexual innuendos that today we see in commercials. But I stood my ground. I was determined that I was going to teach this. And remember now, this was 20 years ago. But ended up going to the school board. And my defense was what it was. And I was asked if I would at least give the child another option. All right? I agreed. Yes, I will give the child the option of reading another book. The book I chose was comparable, but as it turns out, the parent had not read the book. The child was afraid of failing, and that was the impetus for the parent challenging the quality of the book. And I think that is the case in lots of situations. Parents are kind of following the lead, because I think there is this one woman here in South Carolina who is leading the charge. I can't remember her name, but she's been responsible for bringing tons of books before the legislature and before school boards to have them banned. And South Carolina now has the dubious distinction of having banned more books than any other state in the union. And that's just absurd. That is absolutely ridiculous. I wonder how many of these parents who are concerned about their precious babies reading books that might somehow negatively affect them are monitoring their social media, are monitoring their TV watching, are monitoring other things that, the video games, that probably are more detrimental, if you're gonna consider things detrimental, than any book could be.
Give us an example there, sister.
I don't honestly have a specific example. I don't ever remember teaching anything that was challenged. But what I can say is, as a published author, what I have seen and what other authors that I've published for have seen is, if you have a book with an African American child or an African American character on the front, that book isn't for my child. I have been told, I have a neighbor, I am going to share your link with her. I bet she would want that for her daughter. And so our children have been reading books with people that don't look like them on the front all the time. So you should at least read the book to see, because while all of my books have African American characters on the front, none of them even talk about race. Now the middle school book, the chapter book does, but the children's books don't deal with race. They deal with common everyday topics that every child, can deal with. Now, of course, the first one, that was BJ's Big Dream, it talked about hair and him, wanting his hair locked. But at the end of the day, the gist of the book is about dreaming and fulfilling dreams. It's not even necessarily about the hair. So I did want to make that point, that people feel that African American books, they don't relate to their children. And this is not just for picture books. This is for A Lesson Before Dying, anything by Ernest Gaines. And it breaks my heart to see that Walter Dean Myers, for example, his books have been banned because those were some of the books that I enjoyed teaching the most. I've seen Lorraine Hansberry, young, gifted, and black, as well as a Raisin in the Sun. But I think because when I taught those titles, my classes were predominantly African American students, and so I didn't get any issues from that. But one other thing I want to say is, as much as we have the Moms for Liberty out there fighting, we have groups of librarians or media specialists who are forming, and they are coming up with defenses. They are trying to protect themselves, because in February there was a law passed that threatened them and their jobs. They would have to pay fines, they could lose their jobs, they could even go to prison if within their collections there were books found that had explicit sexual images or language or anything on a list of criteria that they're not supposed to have. And this posed a real hardship for media specialists, because they can't by any means read everything that's on their shelf. So to hold them responsible for everything and every word has been very hard, and it has made people leave the profession. But these support groups are great because they're able to help each other and to find ways to, somewhat combat some of these protests that they're getting, and some of the outlandish accusations that aren't necessarily founded. Because again, if you think about the reasons that books are banned, they're often for offensive language, unsuited to age groups, religious viewpoints, themes, and content. But the majority of the books that are being banned are African American books, because if you look at all of the titles, our books outweigh, the number of our books outweigh any other group. Now the LGBTQ books, definitely they're at the top of the list as well, but just because it's by somebody black. And I do want to go on to say that there was an author who came to Pickens last year. His book had been banned, and people were all around the library in Pickens to meet him. And when they heard him and when they saw him, they understood that, he had no intention of offending anybody. And it broke his heart to know that people, banned his book. So when we do have an opportunity to get to know people and really read their book and understand why they wrote what they wrote, it gives us all a different playing field. But the sad thing is, often we're all judged by our skin, and then books are judged too often by their cover, and people never even take the time to figure out what's in the book and what the great message inside the book is as well.
I'm fortunate enough that at the previous school I was a part of, the middle school, so I guess let me back up. I worked at charter schools, so there's a bit more flexibility there. So at the middle school that I was a part of, they were they could pretty much have any book that they wanted, and there weren't too many issues. And then it was a shared library as well with the high school, so things were pretty much just free to do whatever. And then at the current school that I'm at, we have curriculums, so you can't really choose your books. I have a little bit more flexibility with my self-contained class, and with my kids that I pull out with, but I do my best to, just the same way with my own kids, I want them to be well-rounded. I do the same thing with those kids as well. So I do try to give them diverse genres, different characters, and the biggest thing is allowing them to see themselves in the book, and then making connections to people that are different from themselves. So in books where they think they're not going to find anyone that looks like them, this isn't going to be relatable based on what they've seen, building in those connections so they see themselves in characters that might not look like them. And then just even with academic content, if we're doing things like social studies, just giving them the alternate perception. So sometimes, typically, again, I think you guys talk about Christopher Columbus, but yeah, so you get the major perspective where it's he discovered America, blah, blah, blah. But we take it from the other perspective, how did the Native Americans feel? What really happened? What did they see? We'll watch videos, just giving them again, the whole picture, all the context, and then you take from that what you would like.
Amen, sister. I'm with you 100%. Yes. In other words, what I like to say sometimes as well is looking at the reality,
Yeah.
and trying to fill in all of the blanks. Exactly.
Yeah.
sometimes we like to leave some of those out. Did you have anything else to add to that? Well, I was looking up and it seemed like we come around about, there's two individuals. I see Angela Davenport, and you also have who now? Okay, all right, well, I have Angela Davenport. It says the woman behind the recent wave of book bans in South Carolina is a parent from Beaufort County who previously sought to remove 97 books from local schools and now challenging 10 more at the state level, leading to their statewide ban. While several sources confirm her actions and impact, her name is not explicitly mentioned in most major news reports. However, local discussion and reports identify her as Angelina Davenport, who has been active in challenging dozens of books in South Carolina and in the school district.
And the other person is Elizabeth Ivy Zalay, a parent from Beaufort County. She's become a prominent figure in the state's recent surge in school book bans.
So there it is there. Welcome back to the Mock Hour, your host Mustafa, the most powerful hour on radio, where we have one of the most powerful co-hosts as well, Brother Eddie in the nation. We have had a wonderful time here tonight sharing with the sisters, where we have been talking about the importance of reading and books and what they can truly do and make a difference in a child's life, and how important it also can find ways to bond with the parent as well, and you bond through books itself. What I want to do now is I want to go around the room and have to recap some things that maybe we have left out, or some important things that you may have going on in your life that you want others to know, whether it's Juneteenth coming up and you're going to be speaking somewhere, or something that you want to draw the people attention to. So we want to go around the room and take care of that as well. We'll start right here with Sister.
I have no upcoming engagements that I'm aware of, but I would just like to share this information from an article that's called "The Dangerous Books Too Powerful to Read." It says, books carry knowledge. They are pollinators of our minds, spreading self-replicating ideas through space and time. We forget what a miracle it is that marks on a page or screen can enable communication from one brain to another on the far side of the globe or the other end of the century.
Oh man, I like that. Pollinating. I'm about to use that a couple of times. What do you say, Sister? What would you like to leave the audience with, and an understanding of what we tried to discuss here tonight?
I am looking forward to a wonderful, relaxing summer. Relaxing for me is still publishing books, because I enjoy what I do so much. I love books that much, but I love people as well. And I'm glad that these messages are reaching people. So what I will leave you all with are just a couple of quotes. There are so many phenomenal quotes about censorship and book bans, but these are just a couple that are right in front of me right now. One is by Judy Bloom. It says, "It's not just the books under fire now that worry me. It is the books that will never be written, the books that will never be read, and all due to the fear of censorship. As always, young readers will be the real losers." And so I hope that anyone who hears this, who has a book in them, won't allow what's going on, this climate, to stifle them. Write it anyway. If it's censored, just keep writing. Don't ever give up, and know that words have power. The words that keep you reading are the words that will keep others reading, even if you have to go around the school system, around the public libraries, or wherever to get the books out. And so I will say another last quote by Joseph Brodsky. He said, "There are worse crimes than burning books. One of them is not reading them." Thank you.
So if someone was interested in publishing, how would they get in contact with you to do that?
They can reach me at hadassahscrown@gmail.com. hadassahscrown@gmail.com. Hadassah's is spelled Hadassahs. hadassahscrown@gmail.com. Thank you.
Do you have a phone number? Do you have a address maybe they could write as well?
Yes, the phone number for our voicemail system is 864-708-1214. Again, that's 864-708-1214. Correspondence can be sent to 634 Northeast Main Street, number 1263, Simpsonville, South Carolina, 29681. Again, that's 634 Northeast Main Street, number 1263, Simpsonville, South Carolina, 29681.
Thank you, Sister, for that. What do you say, Sister Joy?
I would just say if you have kids that, to just help them, read with them, take them to the library to read, and just everybody read.
Everybody, reading is fundamental. What do you say, Brother Eddie?
I'd say that the artist will always find a way. The artist will always find a way. I think that there's religion, and then there is God. I think that there are time periods where things may seem taboo, and there are times where things seem free and alive. And no matter what is going on around you, if God put it in you, it was meant to come out of you. And that's all I got to say about that.
Well, I was trying to get Driving Miss Daisy in to say something, but they're on their phone and they're busy right now, so they don't want to say anything. But I thought maybe you want to talk about maybe Gear High School or how things was when he was going to school, but he's busy. So this is what I would like to end on this note here. As Sister said, how important it is that you begin to read. Not only that you begin to read, understanding how reading builds a bond. And it can build a bond with your significant other. It can build a bond with your children. So don't think that you may be a listener who's listening who have no children, and now that you are old, well, you have a significant other. If not, you have a close friend. And you and that friend could share a book, whether it's Malcolm X, biography that you want to, whether it's Kill a Mockingbird, whatever it may be. But find something, because as the sister said as well, knowledge is power. And power is what we need now. Understanding this here, that we don't misuse the power that we have, that we spread the wealth, and that we want to use that power in a kind way and a forgiving way. So these are the things that we truly discuss here tonight. And I enjoyed the sisters, and what a wonderful time that we had sharing here tonight. And till next week, Hotel. That's it. 150.
150. Sounds good.
We would have